God gave you a promise, and then he went silent. The dream is still alive in your chest, but the calendar keeps flipping, and nothing on the outside matches what he spoke into the inside. By the end of this, you'll understand why the silence itself is part of the gift. Joseph was 17 when the dream came. Sheaves bowing, stars bowing, a throne implied without ever being named. He was 30 when he stood in front of Pharaoh. 13 years between the promise and the platform. 13 years that included being thrown in a pit by his brothers, sold to traders, framed by a woman who wanted him, and forgotten in a prison cell by a man who owed him. Look at that timeline. The dream went straight through the dungeon. Psalm 105 says it bluntly about Joseph. Till what he foretold came to pass, the word of the Lord tested him. The promise itself was the test. While Joseph was waiting on the word to be fulfilled, the word was fulfilling something in him. That tension behind your ribs right now, the ache of holding something God said and watching your circumstances mock it, that ache has a job. Most people miss it. They treat the waiting season as wasted time. They count the months, they refresh the inbox of their own life looking for movement, and they grow bitter when the calendar flips again and everything looks the same. The waiting room is where you are being formed. Sarah was promised a son, and her body kept aging. David was anointed king as a teenager, and then spent years sleeping in caves, while the current king hunted him with an army. Abraham was promised an entire land, and he died owning a single burial plot inside it. The wilderness is the road the promise walks down. If your life right now looks like the funeral of what God said, you might be exactly on schedule. So what is God actually doing in the silence? He is removing the version of you that would destroy the promise if it arrived early. Joseph at 17 would have been a tyrant on a throne. He was already telling his brothers their dreams of bowing to him, twisting the knife in a family that already resented him, put him in power that young and Egypt becomes his personal kingdom. By 30, after the pit, after slavery, after the prison cell, he could stand in front of the brothers who sold him into slavery and weep instead of execute. The years of silence built the man who could hold the destiny. David got the same education. The prophet Samuel poured oil on his head when he was still a teenager, tending sheep, anointed king of Israel in front of his entire family. Then he went back to the sheep. The future king of Israel went back to feeding sheep. What followed was a manhunt. Saul, the current king, tried to pin him to the wall with a spear. David ran. He hid in caves and pretended to be insane in front of a foreign king to save his own life. He led a band of 400 outcasts through the wilderness, sleeping rough, watching his men nearly mutiny, burying friends along the way. Twice he had Saul cornered. Twice he could have ended the wait with one swing of a blade. And twice he refused because he understood something most of us miss in our own waiting seasons. You cannot kill your way into a promise God has timed. The throne David finally sat on was the throne his character had been built to carry. The years in the cave wrote the Psalms. The Psalms still pastor the church 3,000 years later. The waiting produced more than a king for Israel. It produced a worship leader for every generation that would ever ache the way he did. Habakkuk 2-3 says, "For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay." Notice the paradox. It will linger and it will not delay. Both are true at the same moment. From your seat, the timeline feels like a delay. From God's seat, it is already on time. The appointed time is the moment when the prepared promise and the prepared person finally meet in the same room. You wanted a shortcut. He is giving you a foundation. That is the trade most people quietly refuse. They want the marriage, the ministry, the business, the healing, but they want it before the formation. So they manufacture a counterfeit. They force a door. They marry the wrong person, launch before they are ready, take the platform before they have the character, and then they wonder why the thing collapses under its own weight. The waiting room is a mercy. Cold, lonely, sometimes unbearable, but a mercy. You know the moment. The friend's wedding invitation that arrives in the same week your relationship ends. The job announcement from someone half your age. The pregnancy announcement you have to like with a smile while your own arms feel empty. The waiting season has a way of placing other people's fulfillment directly in your line of sight. And the silence will start lying to you. It will tell you God forgot. It will tell you the promise was a misunderstanding. It will tell you everyone else is moving forward while you stand still. It will whisper that the door has closed, that maybe you missed the window. Those whispers come from the pit, never from the throne. The enemy of your soul cannot stop the promise, so he settles for trying to get you to abandon the post before fulfillment arrives. His weapon of choice in the waiting season is comparison. Scroll long enough and you will find someone who got their version of your promise 5 years ago and seems happier for it. That comparison is poison disguised as information. Your timeline belongs to you alone. Your formation belongs to you alone. The God who custom-built the promise also custom-built the path to it. So while you wait, you have one job. Stay faithful in the small room. Joseph in Potiphar's house ran the household with integrity, even when the dream looked dead. Joseph in prison interpreted dreams for 2 strangers and got forgotten for 2 more years. He kept showing up at the level he was at, even though his heart was built for a level he could not see. That is the discipline nobody prints on a poster. Daily scripture when the heavens feel like brass. Prayer when the words feel hollow. Worship in a season that gives you nothing to celebrate. Showing up for the small assignment when the big one feels delayed indefinitely. Trusting the character of God when the calendar of God refuses to match yours. Maybe you are thinking, what if I heard wrong? What if the promise was just my own desire dressed up in spiritual language? That is a fair question, and it deserves a real answer. The test of a true word is whether it survives scripture, godly counsel, and time. A word from God will hold under pressure that breaks every counterfeit, and it will outlast you when you cannot outlast it, though the waiting will absolutely try to break you. He is strong enough to hold the promise while you fall apart trying to. James 1 puts it this way: the testing of your faith produces perseverance, and perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing. The goal is the person God is building inside the wait, long before he releases the thing you have been asking for, which leads to the reframe that changes everything. The promiser was always the point. If God handed you the answer the day you asked, you would walk away with the gift and forget the giver. The waiting season is where he becomes more real to you than the thing you were waiting for. People who get the promise without the wait often lose both. People who endure the wait often find that by the time the fulfillment arrives, they would trade it back in a heartbeat for the intimacy they found in the dark. So, stop measuring this season by what has not happened yet. Measure it by who you are becoming while you wait. The pit was preparation, the prison too, and so is this silence you are sitting in. The God who spoke the promise is actively closing the gap from a direction you cannot see. Hebrews 6:15 says of Abraham, "And so after waiting patiently, Abraham received what was promised." Notice the order. The waiting came first, the receiving came second. There is no shortcut around that sentence, and there is no shortcut around yours either. Your promise still stands. The God who started the work is the same God finishing it, and the version of you that walks into the fulfillment will be unrecognizable to the version of you who first heard the word. Keep showing up. The appointed time is closer than the silence is telling you.